said mildly. Not quite everybody is anxious to see the space platform take off. Not everybody. What on earth do you think is the biggest problem out where they're building it? I wouldn't know, admitted Joe. Keeping the weight down? But there is a new rocket fuel that's supposed to be alright for sending the platform up. Wasn't that the worst problem? Getting a rocket fuel with enough power per pound? The co-pilot sipped his coffee and made a face. It was too hot. Fella, he said dryly, that stuff was easy. The slide rule boys did that. The big job in making a new moon for the Earth is keeping it from being blown up before it can get out to space. There are few gentlemen who thrive on power politics. They know that once the platform's floating serenely around the Earth with a nice stock of atom-headed guided missiles on board, power politics is finished. So they're doing what they can to keep the world as it's always been, equipped with just one moon and many armies. And they're doing plenty, if you ask me. I've heard, began Joe. You haven't heard the half of it, said the co-pilot. The air transport has lost nearly as many planes and more men on this particular airlift than it did in Korea while that was the big job. I don't know how many other men have been killed, but there's a strictly local hot war going on out where we're headed. No holds barred. Hadn't you heard? It sounded exaggerated. Joe said politely, I heard there was cloak and dagger stuff going on. The pilot drained his cup and handed it to the co-pilot. He said, he thinks you're kidding him. He turned back to the contemplation of the instruments before him and the view out the transparent plastic of the cabin windows. He does? The co-pilot said to Joe, you've got security checks around your plant. They weren't put there for fun. It's 100 times worse, where the whole platform's being built. Security? Said Joe. He shrugged. We know everybody who works at the plant. We've known them all their lives. They'd get mad if we started to get stuffy. We don't bother. That I'd like to see, said the co-pilot skeptically. No barbed wire around the plant? No identity badges you wear when you go in? No. Security officer screaming blue murder every 5 minutes? What do you think all that's for? You built these pilot heroes. You had to have that security stuff. But we didn't, insisted Joe. Not any of it. The plant's been in the same village for 80 years. It started building wagons and plows, and now it turns out machine tools and precision machinery. It's the only factory around, and everybody who works there went to school with everybody else, and so did our fathers, and we know one another. The co-pilot was unconvinced. No kidding? No kidding, Joe assured him. In World War II, the only spy scare inches the village was an FBI man who came around looking for spies. The village cop locked him up and wouldn't believe in his credentials. They had to send somebody from Washington to get him out of jail. The co-pilot grinned reluctantly. I guess there are such places, he said unwisely. You should have built the platform. It's plenty different. On this job, we can't even talk to a girl without security clearance for an interview beforehand, and we can't speak to strange men or go out alone after dark. The pilot grunted. The co-pilot's tone changed. Not quite that bad, he admitted. But it's bad. It's really bad. We lost 3 planes last week. I guess you'd call it an action against saboteurs. 1 flew to pieces in midair. Sabotage. Carrying critical stuff. 1 crashed on takeoff, carrying irreplaceable instruments. Somebody put a detonator in a servo motor, and one froze in its landing light and flew smack dab into its landing field. They had to scrape it up. When the ship got a major overhaul 2 weeks ago, we flew it with our fingers crossed for 4 trips running. Seems to be alright, though. We gave it the works. But I won't look forward to a serene old age until the platform's out of atmosphere. Not me. He went to put the pilot's empty cup in the disposal slot. The plane went on. There wasn't anything underneath but clouds, and there wasn't anything overhead but sky. The clouds were a long way down, and the sky was simply up. Joe looked down and saw a faint spot of racing brightness with a hint of colors around it. It was the sort of nimbus that substitutes for shadow when a plane is high enough above the clouds. It raced madly over the irregular upper surface of the cloud layer. The plane flew and flew. Nothing happened at all. This was 2 hours from the field from which it had taken off with a pilot gyro cases as its last item of collected cargo. Joe remembered how grimly the 2 crew members had prevented anybody from even approaching it on the ground except those who actually loaded the cases, and how one of the 2 had watched them every second. Joe fidgeted. He didn't quite know how to take the co-pilot's talk. The Kenmore Precision Tool Plant was owned by his family, but it wasn't so much a family as a civic enterprise. The young men of the village grew up to regard fanatically fine workmanship with a casual matter-of-factness elsewhere reserved for plowing or deep-sea fishing. Joe's father owned it, and someday Joe might have it, but he couldn't hope to keep the respect of the men in the plant unless he could handle every tool on the place and split 1,000 at least 5 ways. 10 would be better. But as long as the feeling at the plant stayed as it was now, there'd never be a security problem there. If the co-pilot was telling the truth, though, Joe found a slow burn beginning inside him. He had a picture in his mind that was practically a dream. It was of something big and bright and ungainly swimming silently in emptiness with a shield of stars behind it. The stars were tiny pinpoints of light. They were unwinking and distinct because there was no air where this thing floated. The blackness between them was absolute because this was space itself. The thing that floated was a moon, a man-made moon. It was an artificial satellite of Earth. Men were now building it. Presently it would float. As Joe dreamed of it, and where the sun struck it, it would be unbearably bright, and where there were shadows, they would be abysmally black except, perhaps, when Earth shone from the planet